I'm going to start with an anecdote. In 2004, I was a college freshman, and I wrote an economics paper about how we can use tokenized commodities as money. And at the end of my paper, I said the problem is that we don't have a global attestation of what is real. Essentially, it had a double spend problem. And so when I heard about Bitcoin a number of years later, I heard about Bitcoin for the first time in 2012, but in 2013, I read about a concept called colored coins. This was the first real pitch about tokens in Bitcoin that ignited a real conversation, and that's when it all clicked for me. I said, oh, this solves my problem. This allows me to pay in tokenized commodities for anything in the world. This can fix the money because tokens are the actual most valuable thing in the world. Your cash money, those are tokens. Those represent some other value. And so I think people, they distill tokens down to something very simplified because that helps them with whatever other nonsense they're up to usually. But ultimately, all real value in life is tokens. So I brought in, frankly, some of my favorite people in the world to talk about this thing that really means a lot to me. So this panel matters. Tell your friends to come check this panel out. Text them. Go for it. What's a token? Anybody?
So I recently added my definition to Slictionary. So, I have a very strong opinion on this too. So I think if you look at tokens across the board, even going back in time to some of the physical tokens, they really represent the ownership of some rights, duties, and potentially obligations. And I think that really cuts to the core of everything. So if you're at an arcade and they give you a token to go play an arcade game, it's the right to go use a game and play it for a specified amount of time. So it's an obligation, it's a legal component to it. And I think that applies to everything. So if you go to shares, debt instruments, options, all the kind of financial instruments, carbon credits, even passports and these kind of things, they all sort of represent rights, duties, and obligations that the issuer provides and that the holder is entitled to.
James, I often say you've thought more fractally about tokens than anybody else that I've ever met. Can you tell us a little bit about Tokenized, your business? Like, sure. Who is your ideal customer? Why should somebody look at Tokenized versus some other thing?
Sure. So we, just as a little plug, we just launched our desktop app 6 days ago. So it's actually really easy now to kind of try out our app and see our vision for things. But Tokenized, the way we sort of try to frame it and pitch it is we think of ourselves as a smart contracting platform. So if we go back to the idea as defining the token, like what is this thing? What are these instruments that we're holding? What are the value behind them? What are the mechanics around them? Who's involved? We think the smart contracting platform is the most sensible way to kind of really encapsulate all the elements and deliver a really compelling value proposition. We feel that tokens by themselves in a blockchain is a significant advancement, and there's some really important properties that come with that that do add value to a bunch of use cases. But we really thought that there was a lot of opportunities sitting on the table that needed to be tapped into. Someone's going to tap into if it wasn't us. And also to create a business that's this transformative, that's so central to how economies work, like the financial infrastructure, you really need like a 10x improvement. And I'd argue that just tokens on distributed ledgers are probably not quite there. I reckon they're something less. But if you bring smart contracts into it and these smart contracting principles that we've tried to enable, which is really sort of a digital transformation of the contract and sort of the associated records and actions, including tokens being an instrument that's a component of that, that's where you can gain a 10x improvement, and that's where you can get the momentum and the incentives to actually drive change and kind of get widespread adoption. So,
beautiful. Thomas, you're here to speak about STAs tokens. I should also point out each gentleman here is representing a different protocol. In some cases, a business, or in other cases, just simply a method. And so, Thomas, can you explain STAs, what makes STAs unique relative to the other options?
Yeah, so maybe just before that, so we have different versions of STAs. So STAs was invented by Stastrock. Yep. The first version is handled by Tal, and then you can find the second and third version of the stastoken.com website. So the specificity of STAs is that you don't have to rely on external infrastructure to create your tokens, which make it very auditable for any regulated assets that you would like to tokenize. In terms of cost, because when you tokenize an asset, you have also to take care about the cost of transfers of your assets, and you just have to pay the BSV transaction fees. And as you might know, the BSV transaction fees are one of the cheapest, or if not the cheapest on earth. So that's also an advantage of STAs. In terms of security, if you are a bank or if you want to tokenize a fund, financial instruments, or even a central bank, and you want to create your digital currency using the BSV blockchain, STAs is technically audited, so you are sure that all the different levels of the different components of what you want to build are technically audited. So that's also one of the advantage. And finally, you also have some smart contract features on STAs. So you have now strong different teams taking care of the different versions. So you just have to go to the stas.com, stastoken.com website, and then you can be also assisted to build any token that you would like to create.
Brilliant. Luke, you're here representing the one-set Ordinals Protocol, which is the newest and very open, and also a little bit in the tree of what is Bitcoin. Sort of like there's a lot of intrigue around this concept of ordinal tokens. Can you give an explanation on what is an ordinal token generally, and what's the one-set Ordinals Protocol specifically?
Yeah, sure. Ordinal started on BTC. Everybody's pretty much familiar with the term now. It's only been around for a matter of months, and has been now replicated across several blockchains in the ecosystem. And it's all about the fact that, like, BTC originally could not store data, and suddenly, because of the signature properties that they added with Taproot and segregated witness, there was an unexpected consequence that you could make a transaction up to 4 megabytes and store data in there, which really was infuriating to a lot of the folks on that chain, but also incredibly welcome to lots of other people who always have had a latent big blocker inside of them, and that big blocker is now kind of coming out and having a lot of fun on Bitcoin. But there's lots of really weird workarounds that they have to do in order to achieve this. To mint something has to be done in a series of multiple transactions, and you have to stuff the data into an input signature, and kind of these are things to kind of navigate the restrictions that are intentionally there on BTC. And so all we really did was implement the gist of that protocol, but with some key improvements. We couldn't replicate it the exact same way because the networks are now fundamentally very different. But what we did come up with is incredibly simple to use, really easy for developers to implement, really easy for people to understand. And I think that's really the secret sauce here, is that it's like, it's attracting people to work together, to kind of rally around something, and it has a different type of momentum. And I think that's really coming from the fact that, the good way to describe this is, crypto's incredibly tribal. Everybody's got their favorite coin, and they even get to the point of like being militant about this. And I think Ordinals as a concept actually represents like the first nomadic tribe in the crypto ecosystem. There's a whole big group of people who are very enthusiastic about this, and they're willing to cross to another chain to try out Ordinals on Doge or Litecoin or even BSV. So, we're seeing something that we really haven't seen before on Bitcoin SV, which is people coming from all over the place just to mint stuff, mint collections, have fun. And it's been really exciting and great, and has really injected a spirit and an energy into the development community in Bitcoin SV, which is, in my opinion, just really sorely needed.
Yeah. For a touch of context, tokens and really smart contract data on chain, this was a fundamental sticking point. There's a reason there is a BSV at all as a separate asset of Bitcoin, is that certain people, us frankly, we believed that Bitcoin was fundamentally designed to store data and add extra value to data because it's on chain. But that became a very unpopular view. We fought a whole civil war about it, and this is why there is a BTC and a BSV. But it's a coup of sorts to see the BTC people sort of emergently come our direction. So we now have this shared philosophy, even though we've decided to split as a community 5 or 6 years ago now. And so now there's a little bit of cross-pollination and convergent evolution, or whatever else you call it. I'm not an anthropologist. But Brendan, I'd love to come to you. First of all, tell us a bit about Elas token. I know it's more of a method and a business concept for you, but maybe tokens broadly. I love your fertile thoughts about tokens in general.
Sure. I mean, I got to say, I agree entirely with what James said. When you're creating a token, it's all about capturing the intent of the issuer and the right or service or whatever it is that they are selling or giving to the other party in that transaction. And so for us at Elas, we're always looking to find an optimal way to serve that service or that good using the Bitcoin protocol. And so trying to really go deep into the scripting language and develop the functionality that is trying to be handed over in that process using Bitcoin directly rather than having that exist somewhere else up here. So, we don't have a specific token protocol that we use to issue all of our tokens. As Kurt said, it's more of like a method where we capture the issuer's intent with a digital signature, we create a bunch of tokens, and then those tokens are exactly what that service or right that's being sold needs to be delivered within that framework. And so, we've got several customers here today. I see some of them in the audience doing things like NFTs for digital media rights, physical event ticketing. And, so that's a very different token to say what's happening at Tokenized, where they're selling derivative products. And so the token itself that's being created is actually the smart contract that runs the trade. And so the script that's in that token is actually set up to catch the right signature at the right point. It's asserting in the next step of the process that there's a particular delay, for a forward trade, we might say that's 30 days. So in the script, we're looking at, well, what's the timestamp on the first part of this transaction? Well, then we're going to say that the next part of the transaction actually can't occur for that full 30 days. And so we're ensuring that the process that's being delivered is actually being fully supported by the protocol. And so for Tokenized, that means that on their end, actually, they don't need to be explicitly controlling when that signature is captured. They can hand that over to the custodian directly and tell the custodian, well, in 30 days, you can sign that token and that trade will conclude. And it's actually the Bitcoin script that's in that token that's governing that process. And so for them, then they're just waiting for that transaction to come back, capturing it in their database. And so in terms of what that's delivering for them is a really simplified back-end process that still gives us all of what we need for that trade to take place. These are highly regulated events. And so, it's all about really meeting the market in terms of the functionality that they need through the Bitcoin protocol.
So let's talk a little bit technically, because for anybody not watching or not engaged in the token space, why not build on Polygon or Ethereum or Solana or why Bitcoin tokens? Now, you all represent different ideas about how to do a Bitcoin token. For example, Tokenized is it's an overlay, so it's on Bitcoin. It's sort of how I picture it. Whereas a Ordinal sort of is a Bitcoin in many ways, is it's a painted SAT. Whereas STAs and Elas, it's a use of script internally. So there's many ways to think about how to create another asset within this network. For those who maybe also aren't particularly technical, Bitcoin really is just a database and a network, and then there's computation logic that you can deploy with a transaction. So a simple transaction is, here's a coin, but a more complex transaction can be, here's a coin plus a little program that goes with it. Right. And then we're going to write that to this database. Now, returning to my question, why not Polygon? Why not Ethereum? What is the value of a Bitcoin token? And I'd like you guys to fight over this question, please.
Well, the one super obvious thing, when looking at ordinals, this is really great because we have comps that we can look at on BTC, for example, and see how things go there. And you see that, as the block size is limited, when you start getting some volume and some attention around these tokens, the fees get really high. And then doing things like let's say you had an open social protocol and every post is a token of some sort. Obviously, social media apps have tons and tons of activity. Imagine paying, $10 every time you want to make a post on, Twitter or something like that. It's like ridiculous. And $10 is not where this stops. That's where it starts. So, it's very obvious there's some use cases that really benefit from, having the low fees, and I'll leave some of the low-hanging fruit for everybody else.
Yeah, I think for us, we look at these other blockchains like Polygon. These were really created because the other blockchains that those same people were working on didn't work, and these new blockchains that they've developed essentially manifest all of the same problems. They have the same fee issues, they don't scale, and I'm probably one of the biggest supporters of BSV, but it's because of that scale. The story of Bitcoin is that it's here to change the whole world, and you can't change the whole world unless you can accommodate the demands of the whole world. And so I don't see any other blockchain that's out there that's actually working on the very, very hard problem of scaling to support, many billions of transactions every day. And so for us, that just means that anything else is a non-starter.
Yeah.
So I add a couple comments, if I may. Yeah, so the way we thought about it from a business, so we're very pragmatic about delivering value to customers so that we can get value back, essentially, right? So why is it useful? Why are we wasting our time building on this? And so we try to really drill down, what is blockchain? What is valuable about it? And I think Bitcoin, the original design of it was extremely elegant, extremely well thought through, and it didn't try to do too much. It just picked what was valuable and unique and novel about it and designed something that served that purpose in the most efficient, most useful, most economically practical way. So timestamping, immutable audit trail, this ledger. So I think of it a little differently. It's not a database in my mind. It's more of a distributed ledger. And this ledger can exist across many databases and many services, but everyone can be on the same page with what that ledger says and who authorized it and when it happened, right? That's really, really valuable, right? So it's valuable too because the proof of work system is sort of out of the hands of any particular government or jurisdiction. So you have this network that can create a trusted ledger that doesn't have jurisdictional risk, political risk, or even organizational risk. So those things are quite really, really compelling all in one package, but it really comes down to that timestamping immutable audit trail that everyone can be in sync with, right? Across all kinds of organizations and contexts and things like that. And so Bitcoin really does that really, really well. And the original vision, everything else that I've seen tries to do more and tries to add things in a way that isn't useful, doesn't add to the value proposition, and just adds complexity that doesn't help anyone, adds costs. And I think most of the time when I've really analyzed why they made the decisions, it was just a fundamental misunderstanding of what the real value proposition was. I think the other part, so of course that means it scales better than anything else. It's cheaper than anything else. It's more compelling, and there's economies of scale that really come into play. And it does that timestamping, ledger, immutable audit trail better than anything else. And the last thing I think is the people. So when we looked at Bitcoin SV and we looked at the other teams, there is real conviction here, and the people that are in important positions and contributing to the overall vision, pushing it forward, I think are just more sensible, they have better judgment when it comes to the practicalities of business and how the world works and what the value proposition is. And I think that collective energy and conviction is incredibly important for pushing this forward. And I think there's no comparison. I think there's a stark difference between any other network, even the mall combined type thing compared to BSV. So from a selfish point of view, those are all critical things in order for it to be around in 10 years and deliver on what we need to do.
Just want to say something just to add to what James said, on cost specifically. It's not that the cost is low, it's that the cost is low and it is stable.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the demand is on any given day, I'm going to pay the same price for my transactions. So we can go to our customers and say, if you're going to process 1 billion transactions a month, it's going to cost this.
Yeah.
And that's not going to change.
Well, right. It's like it's valuable for the same reason that it's valuable to not have high toll days to use the internet or to text your friends.
Yeah.
So, Luke, I see you wanting to say something.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to also look at the other side of this coin a little bit. Like, why are so many people minting on these other networks, and why are they attracted to these things, even despite all of these limitations? And I think that's an important aspect to really think about, and that really speaks to why One Set Ordinals has been so successful, is that it's more about tapping into an existing network effect. It's about putting your NFT collection into an ecosystem where there's lots of buyers and lots of activity, and all of that. And I mean, we all benefit much more if this is a much larger ecosystem. Everybody's tapped in. Like if there's one coin to rule them all, like if Bitcoin is this one base layer and we're all doing this, no matter what token protocol it was or whatever, it would be much, much better that way. But this is kind of, I think, an important aspect, because the community sentiment matters, where the energy is matters, and all of that is an important aspect, and we really do need to bring some of that home.
Yeah. Thomas, please.
Oh, yeah, I will echo everything, but I think when you want to create a token, any kind of token, and I think the example of Centi with the Swiss bank creating a stablecoin is a good one. The reason why a bank shows this technology, actually, there are 3 main criteria when you want to create a token. It's cost, speed, and security. That's, at the end, that's the different criteria. So in terms of cost, of course, the token protocol are benefiting about the underlying technology, BSV, which is the cheapest. So that's the first criteria. In terms of speed, if you compare BSV to Ethereum to BTC, we are 10 or 100 times or even more faster than any other blockchain. In terms of security, but thanks to the proof of work, but also to other ecosystem projects, we are and we will be also the most secure blockchain. So I think this is important to understand how banks, like real banks, are already are today choosing BSV to build their own stablecoin because of these different criteria, and that's why BSV at the end should and will win, because of our positioning within these criteria.
So let's shift a little bit. I started by saying that tokens are the most important thing that you're going to hear about at this conference, but to date, if you were to go look at what are tokens used for, it's primarily low-resolution art of frogs and apes of various quality. And I'm talking to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars circulating on this. And if you look at, well, is anybody trading rare earth metals, or how many CBDCs are issued as tokens? The answer is functionally 0 in many regards. And so, am I crazy? Are we crazy? Or is this just a function of the fact that, are we early? This is the people that, well, we're just early. But we're 15 years into this Bitcoin experiment. And, the greatest disruption we've had is essentially digital playing cards. How do we get $1 trillion a day in CBDCs moving across ledgers as tokens, or trading complex financial instruments, or people making their home sales, or all these other things? And again, please fight over this question. I really want this to be an open discussion here.
I think it's, use the Trojan horse approach, almost like there's energy in crypto-like community at large. And if you notice something, like, it's easy to write these people off, right? They've got these weird PFPs that are their profile pictures, but you want to know what, these days, if you go into like some kind of like official meeting or something like that, you'll see like half of these developers that are for big companies have these same profile pictures. This is something that is it's a real shift in the way that people, it's just a culture. It's a whole culture that has grown up around all of this stuff. And if we, instead of like pushing that away and trying to keep that at arm's length or whatever, these are normal people with real jobs and real, purpose in life and everything, just like the rest of us. So getting them, speaking their language a little bit more, I think would just, really bring us forward. And then those people feel comfortable bringing these ideas into other things. And also, you know, if they get in onto ordinals and they're checking this out, like, oh, now I can see apples to apples, you know, BTC ordinals versus BSV because they're in the same wallet or something like this. It's really difficult not to see all of these other value propositions. But you're not ever going to see if you don't even go over there because, you know, these guys are talking about all this, you know, enterprise stuff that doesn't match with this culture that I'm used to being a part of this.
So maybe playing a race car video game to learn to drive? Gentlemen, please, other feedback.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you talk about tokens for precious metals or CBDCs or real like capital market assets that are being traded out there in the bourse, you know, big exchanges and things like that. Part of it is the tooling and the fact that what exists isn't really that broken at the moment.
Sure.
And so this is where it comes down to what James said, where we need to be tenfold better. And I think there'll be a watershed moment where something comes out, and I'm very excited by the release of the tokenized desktop package because I think that's getting very close to that tenfold improvement in how to issue something, but not just how to issue something, but to issue something where there is a real capturing of that legal contract around what that is, what are the rights that are being transferred, what is actually the ownership that is conferred to the holder of that token. And in some respects, I don't think that has really been well expressed in the past. And so I think, you know, when it happens, it'll happen actually quite quickly.
Yeah.
But we're still waiting for that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate the kind words, but I'd like to add to that too and build on what you said there. So I think the hurdle is high to get to a compelling value proposition. I think that's a key insight. So I think if you look at the public markets today, you had dematerialization in the 80s, depending on where you are, but a long time ago. And then you've had 20, 30 years of software development. The tech is really good in the public markets, right? Like I think the differential between having a public stock on existing tech versus having it on a distributed ledger, fairly small differential in value proposition. And so it's not that compelling, and there's not a lot of effort really going into making that work. But the private markets are still very paper-based or poorly digitized is probably the best way to put it. And that's where the big opportunity is. It's also where most of the complexity is because private deals and private contracts, they vary a lot more, right? So public, there's a lot of standardization around what the rights and duties are, how the mechanics operate, who's filings and reportings and things like that. So in the private markets, that's where a lot of the complexity exists, a lot of tools like Word, documents, Excel, a lot of manual handling, a lot of administrative tasks, and the life cycle is more complex overall. There's more events, there's more possibilities, but that's where the big opportunity is in our view. So you have to get that entire administrative process streamlined and refactored, pull all the redundancy out of it, and you have to present it in a useful way. And you have to do it for a number of instruments so that it can capture all the needs, because these instruments often interact and they're often in parallel with each other with these deals. So that hump to get over is quite steep, but it also means there's a big moat behind you when you get there. And it also means that the value proposition is absolutely enormous because the private markets are much, much bigger than the public markets. And it's just an enormous time sink today with very, very high quality, very productive people spend time on just paper administrative stuff that's fairly routine. So that's where we see the big value prop. We think just giving a token to someone and then still dealing with all the administrative stuff traditionally doesn't really add much to the equation. You really got to tackle the whole value stream and bring it all under control and create a digital transformation.
Yeah. Thomas.
No, and there is also the reason why it's the different tokens related to the gaming industry are the most known is because when you have a token and you have to represent digital the value for digital assets, you have to involve all the different stakeholders. So in a game, for instance, they control the entire ecosystem. So that's why with the digital native economy within the gaming industry, the tokens are very in advance compared to other industries. One of the main and most important market will be the financial markets to tokenize. For instance, all the stock exchanges all the world are currently digitizing the entire stock exchange and representing through tokens all company shares. It will be the same thing for apartments, buildings, and so on. But in order for this kind of market to emerge, you have to convince all the stakeholders within the ecosystem to accept the fact that now it will be a token representing the asset. And if you want to be able, because that will be the case, we're going to be able to buy apartments on WhatsApp with an apartment representing a token. But in order for us to do that, the state has to update their registry based on the blockchain technology. So that takes time, right? So in Geneva, I know that the states already started this kind of project. In Switzerland, they are very in advance on that, but it takes time. That's also why the main revolution takes time, because you have so many stakeholders to convince that it takes years for that.
Yeah. Well, I think, in closing, you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of the conversations that we're having, tokens, the way they've been implemented everywhere else, have this notion that they should be interoperable with multiple networks and all these other things. But in reality, the reason why BSV tokens matter is we're the only group that's trying to give the whole world a tool that the whole world can use at the same time, which immediately gives you a 99% reduction in friction for us to be able to trade any of our kinds of tokens or wrap each other's tokens on each other and have that predictable fee forever. Whether we have 1,000 customers or 8 billion customers, you know what to expect in the economic system, which is where we're trying to create value. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure for me, and thank you to the audience for listening to the most important presentation.